Okay, we're up to Chaf Vav Amid Beis. We're in the middle of a shaila. What happens if you have, it's the din of Yesh Miksach Muksa. In other words, if it's not Muksa the whole day, only part of the day, does that render it Muksa the whole day? So the Gemara asks, L'charetz, it's Pashit. If it was, it depends upon Neshmashas. If Ben Neshmashas, it was Asa, it's Asa. Ben Neshmashas, Mutta is Mutta. So the Gemara says, no, it was Mutta Ben Neshmashas, and then during Shabbos it became Muksa, and then it became Mutta again. So you had fruit that was in the ballpark, out of the ballpark, in the ballpark. So you wanted to be Pasha the Shaila from our Mishnah. We got into our Mishnah. The Bechor initially was okay. When it was in its mother, then it was born. It's out of the ballpark. Then you showed to a Chacham, it's in the ballpark. And then we said it's speaking about that it was never out of the ballpark. Was when it was born, the mum was with it. We had a dayan that was sitting right there, so it was never out of the ballpark. So back to the Shaila. We want to be Pasha the Shaila. We're up to Tashma, 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 14, 16 lines, 15 lines from the bottom. Tashma. A person's eating anovim, and he has leftover. Vehelon legag, lasses meant simukim, and he puts them on the roof. So he had grapes, and he put them on the roof. He wants to make them into raisins. Or he was eating figs. He had leftover figs. The hell on the gag lasses men grace, and they put them on the roof to make them on into figs. So lo yochel mehem, he should not eat from them at sheyazmin midbayim unless he went ahead and prepared them while it was still erev yontif. So too you find by arfasekin peaches, chavushim quinces, ubishal kamini peris. Lav dafka erev yontif. I feel erev Shabbos. This is Gemara in Shabbos. So the Gemara wants to know exactly what's the mitzias of this case, and how it can reflect upon our shaila to possibly answer our shaila. Hechidami. If we're speaking about that the fruit was right to eat, bein hashmashos, lamalei hazmana. Why do you have to go ahead and be mazing the fruit? And if they were not going ahead and right to be eaten, ki azman lahu mayhave. The bottom line is, l'chayr should not depend upon your hazmana. It should depend upon whether they're muktzah or not. Yet this shaila depends upon hazmana or not. You tell me the lo yoda chazi aloi chazi. He doesn't know if they're muktzah or not. Ayvu amrav kahana muktzah sheyavesh ve'ena bailam makirin boy muktzah that dried out and the baal does not makir mutter. So therefore, even if he doesn't know, it should be a mutter. And you don't and hasmana, you will need hasmana. Elolav, it must be. Here's the mitzias of the case, and this is how it would reflect upon our shaila. The chazi was in the ballpark. The idchi then it was out of the ballpark. For had the ichsi, and then it got back in the ballpark. The amit ain muktzah, and if you're going to tell me it's not muktzah, so who cares that it was out of the ballpark? Lamalu hazmana. Why do you have to hazmana at all? So it must be that what yesh muktzah. Hazmana is to take care of the muktzah problem. So it must be it was in the ballpark, went out of the ballpark, back in the ballpark. When it was out of the ballpark, it's out, and therefore when it went back in, the only way I could eat it depends upon whether they were hazmana or not. So l'chara we can be paisha the shaila that is ein hazmana, ein muktzah lechatzi Shabbos. Elamai, what are you going to say the other way? Yesh muktzah. You're going to say yesh muktzah that what is muktzah, and that's why you need hazmana. Ki azman l'hu mahavi. If it's muktzah, hazmana is not going to help. So it says more like stricha the ichsi v'lo yichsi. It was some people eat it, some people don't. The ikin shidiachli, the ikin shidlayachli. Azmin, if you go ahead and prepare them. Goli daite, that you're the one who eats it, and therefore what? It's not muktzah at all. Lo yasmin, if you do not go ahead and prepare it, lo goli daite, you're not goli daite. So bemis, you can't be pushed that shaila from here because this zimun, here we're speaking about something is a shaila whether the person uses it or not, and therefore the hazmana would create the fact that it's not muktzah. If I'm mazing shaila, I eat it. If I'm not mazing mishala, I don't eat it. But it's not speaking about a case where it's mutta, it was in the ballpark, out of the ballpark, in the ballpark. It's speaking about a case where your hazman is going to make it in the ballpark, or your lack of hazman is going to leave it out of the ballpark, but it has no bearing on Ashayla whatsoever. Toshma, let's bring a raya that ain muktzah lechatzi Shabbos. Now, this is a very interesting. Usually, Toshma, you're bringing a brisa or a mishnah to go ahead and answer the question. Over here, it's simply Amaroyim talking. Says the Gemara, Toshma, me pulin v'adashim. Let's bring a raya from beans and lentils. The pulin v'adashim me kara chazi lakos. When they're raw, you're able to chew them. So they're in the ballpark. Shadinu b'kedera, and when you put them in the pot and now they get heated up, atchilahu, then they're out of the ballpark. You push them away. Gama b'shulayu, once they're completed, chazilahu, then what? They're what? They're permitted. So let's bring a raya that even though they were out of the ballpark when they were what? When they were boiling, ein muktzah lechatzi Shabbos. There's no muktzah. According to you, tikshi lecha kederis to alma. Why don't you forget about a kederis to alma? Let's say a kedera, a regular pot, is boiling. Let's say you couldn't chew it. Let's say you couldn't chew it at all. Bein hashmashis is boiling. It's out of the ballpark. You're going to tell me that you can't eat it on Shabbos? If you're going to tell me that out of the ballpark means when it's cooking, boiling, at that point it's considered out of the ballpark, you should never be able to eat any food that was boiling bein hashmashis, guys, right? If bein hashmashis was muktzah because it was boiling, you wouldn't be able to eat it. So l'chayra, it must be that boiling is not considered out of the ballpark, and memela has no bearing on a shaila. Says let's ask a question. Stam kedera, the stam kedera to alma ben hashmashis for sachasein. They're boiling. Ula urta, and in the evening, after later on in that night, achlin minayu ifmit. So therefore, it must be that what that they're not itchi. What do you have to conclude? Gamru b'dei adam loy kami boilan. Something that's completed by a person is not a shaila. Ki kami boilan. A shaila is gamru b'dei shemayim. Whether it was completed b'dei shemayim, whether it rained or it didn't rain, it dried up, it didn't dry up. Rashi says beautifully. Let's see Rashi. Elamidi the gamru b'dei adam loy kami boilan. The kivin the biyadar letaknoi by bayim. Since you can go ahead and do it during the day, loy mekatz loy medaite mifnei the chiyasai. You're not mekatz das just because it's out of the ballpark now. What are you going to say? Right now, it's boiling, it's out of the ballpark. I don't have to boil it now. I could have boiled it any time. In other words, I could have gone ahead and made this roy anytime. Where that doesn't depend upon me, it's drying, and I can't go ahead and facilitate the drying process because I need the sun to do it. Then it's out of the ballpark. I can't go ahead and bring it back earlier. I can't have make a camera pre-force it. But over here, where you could pre-force it by going ahead and cooking hilkach pulin badoshim. They have no bearing on the shaila. High time in nami sharina kederish shel bein hashmashas, and therefore memela bein hashmashas. Despite the fact that it's boiling, I could have done it during the day. It's not out of the ballpark. It remains in a bayid lo yifshita, guys. It remains in a bayid lo yifshita. Okay, getting back to the what teiku is a boilahu. Teiku is a direct question usually, and again, many needs a bayid lo yifshita about a teiku. Now usually teiku is two tzadim to the shaila, not one side to the shaila. Do you view it this way? Do you view it that way? Okay. Anyway, l'chala pachas, guys. What was that shaila? Why did we get into it in the first place? What are we discussing? We're discussing whether you can see a mum on yontif or not. That was the shaila. Again, in the sugya of bechor, a bechor cannot be eaten in its state of without a blemish if it's a tam. Actually, it's a severe problem. Because if you would shech the bechor and eat it, you'll be over on shchutei chutz, which is an isakaris, guys. It's an isakaris to shech the bechor. So really, you have to make sure that has the mum. Then when it has the mum, it's right for a kohen. A kohen could shech it and can do whatever he wants with it. Okay, so Ashayla was, Roy, do you look at a mum and not? Rabbi Yehuda said you do look at a mum, and Rav Shimon said you don't look at a mum. Rabbi Yehuda says you do look at a mum. Rav Shimon says you don't look at a mum. Derech hakdama machloikas Rabbi Yehuda, Rav Shimon the halach is like Rabbi Yehuda. So if you would just end the Gemara right here, you'd say you would be able to look at a bechor mum on yontif in order to facilitate its shchita and its achila. That's what you say right now. But do not leave because, as you know, it's not going to be so pashut and it won't be what you think it's going to be. So now, Rabbi Yehuda and Nasiya. Now I always say this, guys. Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi, Rabbi Yehuda and Nasiya were two different people. Rabbi Yehuda Nasi had a son, Rabbi Gamliel. Rabbi Gamliel had a son, Rabbi Yehuda Nasiya. He's Rebbe's grandson. He's not Rabbeinu HaKadosh. Rabbeinu HaKadosh is Rebbe. That's Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi. This is Rabbi Yehuda Nasiya. Put it in your memory banks. Rabbi Rosenzweig, teach your Talmidim, okay? It's not people make a mistake. It's not Rabbi Yehuda Nasi. It's Rabbi Yehuda Nasiya. It's his grandson. So Rabbi Yehuda Nasiya Havile Ahu Buchra.
I'm the English principal.
No excuses. No excuses. There's a rabbi in front of your name. You're a mechanech. Now, Rabbi Yehuda Nasiya Havile Ahu Buchra. He had this buchar. Shadri lekamei de Ravami. He sent in front of Ravami. Savar and Ravami. The leil michsaya. He didn't want to look at it like Rav Shimon. He didn't want to look at Rav Shimon. So Amalei Rav Zerika Vitem Rav Yirmiyah. Rav Yehuda Rav Shimon. Allah Rav Yehuda. So l'chayra, you should go ahead and you should look at it. Hada Shadri lekamei de Rav Yitzchak Nafcha. He went there and he sent in front of Rabbi Yitzchak Nafcha. So now, they sent the Bechor now to Rabbi Yitzchak Nafcha. Savad Leil Machaz. He also held not to steal like Reb Shimon. Amalei Rav Yomi, Avitim Rav Zrika, Rav Yehuda, Rav Shimon, Alach Rav Yehuda. The Alach Rav Yehuda. So why are you not looking at it? In other words, the same problem. Why are you not looking at this Bechor? Rabbi Yehuda says you could look at the Bechor, the mum on Yontif. Amalei Rabbi Abba, my time Eloi Shaf Gisinul Rabbanon, Alamevad of the Reb Shimon. Why did you send to Rabbanon to make an uvda to Reb Shimon? That they're pasking that, but it's asa. Amalei va'amat biyadcha. What do you hold? Amalei hachi Amar Reb Zeira. Halach Reb Shimon. Amar Mandahu. There's the name of an ambiguous person. It says Mandahu. Aske v'asek lahasam. I should be zarka go up to Eretz Yisrael to see Reb Zeira. Va'agmei l'shmaitzim mipumi demara, and to learn the sugya from the mouth of Reb Zeira, who was the Mari the Shmaitza. He saw the lahasam when he went up there. Ashkel Reb Zeira, and so this Mandahu found Reb Zeira. Amalei Amar Mar alach Reb Shimon. The Mar says lach Reb Shimon that you can't look at a mum. Amalei loyanam, right? Loyano, I didn't say that, but Mistabra Army, Mistabra, it's Svara, it said. In other words, I never heard anyone say it, but Mistabra said the Allah is like Rabbi Shimon. Now, again, one against one. Reb Shimon, Reb Yehuda, we're going to pass like Reb Yehuda. So it must be Reb Shimon has somebody else going according them for them to be majority opinion to override Reb Yehuda. And that's what we're going to have. We're going to have an override on Reb Yehuda. Son of Shimon Omer, Kol Shein Mumay Nika Mibayoim. And anything that's not recognizable during the day. And we said it has to be there was a mum there, it just wasn't looked at. And Rabbi Oishi is Brisa. We had a Brisa of Oishi yesterday. And Rabbi Oishi in the Brisa didn't quote it in the name of Shimon. He quoted it in the name of the Chachamim. The Chachamim Oisrim. So now you have Chachamim and Rav Shimon against Rabbi Yehuda. Therefore, we go in that opinion to say, don't look at a mum on Yontif. Shmamina mistabra kavasela like of Shimon not to look at a mum. My havila, I attached this the bottom line. So at the end of the sugya, what's the bottom line? Can you look at a mum and not look at a mum? Some of Yosef Toshma, the Talia ba'ashli Ravavi. This is a major heavy hitters. It's totally in great Talmid Chachamim. The Amr of Shimon ben Pazi, Amr of Yeshua ben Levi, Amr of Yossi ben Shaul, Amr Rebbe Mishum Kehila Kedisha de Yerushalayim. Reb Shimon, this is Reb Shimon ben Menashe v'Chavei Rav Amru. Halacha Reb Meir. The halacha is like Reb Meir. So now we're going to have Reb Meir and Reb Shimon against Reb Yehuda. So now let's see how this works out. This Kehila Kedusha Shalayim and this din of Reb Meir. Right. Halacha Reb Meir Amru. They said halacha is Reb Meir. He was older than them. Tuva. In other words, he was, I guess, younger than them. Right. Kishish is younger. Right. He was younger than them. What does he say? Kishisha is younger or older? Older. They're older than the Kehila Kedusha Yerushalayim, Tuva. El B'shitas Reb Meir Amrua. They said it in the Shita of Reb Meir. Nan. Now, listen. You got to be really, really crazy to have a Bechor with a mum that you don't know if it's a mum oiver and you're not allowed to shecht it, or it's a mum kavua and you do shecht it. So this person had a mum. They went ahead and they shechted it without asking a question, and they asked the question afterwards. So he was nichnas into a suffix of kares. Hashoichet es abechar, the achakach hera es mumai, and afterwards he showed the mum, and it turned out to be a mum kavua. Rabbi Yehuda matir. Rabbi Yehuda says it's permitted. Rabbi Meir oimer hoyel v'nishchat, since it was slaughtered shaloi al pi mumcha, because you asked afterwards. Usser, it's usser. The Gemara's Havamina is Rabbi Yehuda l'shitasai that you can shech without you can ask, right? And shech, and he says Rav Shimon you can't shech and ask. So Havamina is Rav Meir holds like Rav Shimon that you can't shech. Al Muksav Rav Meir Riyas Bechar Lav Kriyas Treifa. The Riyas Bechar is not like the Riyas of a Treifa. Riyas Bechar Mechayim. Riyas Bechar has to be when it's alive, not after it's slaughtered. Riyas Treifa la'acha shchita, and the Riyas of a Treifa is after shchita. It's two totally, excuse the pun, it's two totally different animals. A Treifa is you did a good shchita, and the shchita is poil. The shchita would take off tumas nevela. If you find out you can't eat this animal afterwards because it's a Treifa, nonetheless the shchita is given a shchita. It took off it's not nevela, it's not matama b'magu b'masa. So the re'iyah of a treifa is after the shchita. Conversely, a bechar To matter the shechit in the first place, you have to know whether you can shecht it or not. Because even if you don't eat it and it's not a mum, it's shchutei chutz. So therefore, the Rameya said you can't shecht it. Now, umina, and here's where the Ketil Kadosh Yerushalayim got the din from. Riyash treifa fila b'yantif. You could look at treifa fila b'yantif, and riyash b'chor may erev yantif. In other words, if it's so machmir that the Inyan shechting the b'chor that has to be when it's alive, that has to be erev yantif. In other words, we zustelled Reb Meir's psak about looking at it afterwards to the need to go ahead and look at it erev yantif, which would make him like Rav Shimon that you can only go ahead and look at it erev yantif. So therefore, in this whole sugya, at this point in time, we want to say the reason we want to be choshitz Rav Shimon and not Reb Yehuda, even though mano a mano will go according to Reb Yehuda, over here we won't because Reb Meir goes according to him. Now, of course, what we're going to do is to slug up that Reb Meir is a whole different animal. Excuse the pun, but really a totally different thing. Amalei Abaya. Here, it's an obvious question, guys. Otu Hasan Beroyin Mumin Pligi. Is Reb Meir and the Chachamim arguing, and Rabbi Yehuda saying whether you could look at a mum and not look at a mum? Bikanasa pligi. They're arguing whether you cancer a person after the fact. Perish, guys. Look at me, guys. What should you have done? You should have gone to a person, asked for him to look at the mum, and then shecht it. What did you do? You didn't do that. You shechted it, and then you asked the shaila. After you asked the shaila, they said, "Wow, ein mum kavua gedai lemizu." You say, "Woo, no problem with shchutei chutz. Loma fressen. Let me go eat." Says the mayor, "No. You did wrong. Since you did wrong, you know what? We're going to cancel you. We're going to go ahead and give you a fine, and therefore it's usher." For Rabbi Yehuda matir. What did Rabbi Yehuda matir? He matir to eat the meat after you asked the shaila. So everyone holds royin that you're supposed to look. It could be looking at an erev yantif. It could be looking at it on yantif. It could be looking at Rabbi Yehuda that you can look at it on yantif. The machlokes over here, Rabbi Meir and Rabbi Yehuda, has nothing to do with looking on yantif. It has to do with, do we find the guy for not having yes the shiloh or not? So Memela, we're back to first base. Machlokes Rabbi Shimon and Rabbi Yehuda, the halach is like Rabbi Yehuda. So why in the world can you look what at a mum on yantif? Why can't, if the halach is like Rabbi Yehuda, you should have to look at a mum. And you can't tell me Rabbi Meir holds like Shimon, because Rabbi Meir is not speaking about that shiloh at all. He's speaking about canceling the guy after the fact. Guys, you good? Okay. Says the Gemara. Amar Rabba Barav Chana, Amar Rabbi Yochanan, Bidukin Sheba Ayin. Now, it seems like a cataract can be a mum oiver or it can be a mum kavua. You don't know. And it's subject to its changing after death. So now, Bidukin Sheba Ayin Kuliyam Le Pligi the Usser. It's Usser the Shech, because maybe it's going to change. Mishum Dimish Taninon, and it changes. Ki Pligi B'Mumin Sheba Guf, a mum kavua in the guf. Meya Sava Gazrina Mumin Sheba Guf at the Mumin Sheba Ayin, make Gesera. Now you see an animal with a broken leg. If you go ahead and shecht it with a broken leg, you may come to go ahead and shecht it out within a cataract. Rabbi Yehuda says loy gazrinan. Rabbi Yehuda says loy gazrinan. So Memela, unequivocally, we've proven it has nothing to do with the shiloh whether what you can look at a mum on yantif or not. Rav Nachman Yitzchak, my sister Namideka, the Mishnah in Bechoros that we just mentioned, Rabbi Yehuda and Machlekes Rabbi Yehuda Meir is also meduyik that it's speaking about a knas. Diktani Rabbi Meir Omer Hoyel v'nishchat. Since nishchat shaloy pi mumcha asar, since you shechted it, since you shechted it, shaloy pi. Right, look at the lashon, guys. Look at Mishnah Tan. Hashechles b'char v'yakacheres mumoy Rabbi Yehuda matir Rabbi Omer Hoyel v'nishchat shaloy pi mumcha. Since you shechted it without having looked at a mumcha asar, meaning it's your chesaron was that you didn't bring it to a mumcha to look. That's the chesaron, and therefore what? That's why you can't eat it. Of course, we can't see you. Shmamino knasuhu, the kakona shmamino, you have a good raya. Okay, bottom line is, guys, we don't know why you can't look at it. No one holds like Rav Shimon yet. Anyway, Ami Vardinoa, that was his name. Ami Vardinoa, Chase Burchu de Benasiya Havi. He was the expert at looking at what the mumim of the Benasiya. Havi Chase, but he didn't look at it on Yantif like Rav Shimon. Asav Amalei L'Ravami. Amalu Shapik of it Chazi. Very good. He did the right thing. In is it really so? Ravami Gufa Chazi. Ravami also he looked at it on Yantif like Rabbi Yehuda. No, Rav Ami kichasi me'emal havichasi. Really, Rav Ami, he looked at it the day before, Amid base. He looked at it on Erev Yontif, like Rav Shimon. Ubi Yontif shiuli kamashal, hechi avi uvda. And Yontif, you would ask what the uvda was. Says Rashi, guys. Ubi Yontif shiuli kamashal, pamim shoyitar be'erev Yontif. At times, Rav Ami was busy Erev Yontif. Umeshara mumim, and when you look at the mum, Aymaloi would say, Lech achshav, go away now, ubala machar, and come tomorrow. Vayishoyloi al mum, and he would ask on the mum, Eich baloi, how did this mum come about? Think about it, guys. You're a kohen. Someone does you a toiva. He shows up at your house. He shows up with a nice cow and says, "Here." Obviously, it can't be a cow. It has to be an ox because the bechor is only a male. So Moshe, I'm surprised you didn't get me on that one. So now you show it with an ox, but he shows up with an ox. Says, here it is. You say, "What am I going to do with this?" So what you're going to do with this, if you're a kohen, is to make sure it grazes in razor blades. You're going to make sure that it goes ahead and gets a mum. You want it to get a mum because until it gets a mum, you have kachim in your rishus. The kahanim guys, they were notorious that they would go ahead and do things to get a mum in your animal. So therefore, even after he would look at it and say it's a mum, that would not go ahead and give you a permission to eat it. You'd first have to go to the Drishin and Chakiris. You'd have to check to see how exactly that mum get there. Because if that mum got there in a nefarious way, if it got there in a very, like this, we're not going to let you eat it. We'll cancel you. So therefore, Rav Ami would look at it, what? Erev Yontif, like Rav Shimon. What did he look at? What did he mean he looked at it on Yontif? He looked and went and he asked the questions. Not that he looked at the mum. He asked the questions how the mum got there. As the Gemara continues. There was this individual, the Asrei Bruchul Kamei de Rava, Apanya de Malayumatava. He bought a Bechar in front of Rava on the afternoon of Erev Yontif. Havi Yosef Rava, Rava was doing, I think he was shampooing his hair. Dola Eine looked up, he took a look at the mum. Amalei told the individual, Zilla, did not leave now, but come back the next day. When he came back the next day, exactly how, what's this mum doing there? How does this mum get there? Amalei, Havi Shedayin, sorry, Bahakisa Dehutza. I was throwing barley on the other side of a fence that was made of thorns. Havi Iu Beidach Kisa. Bahadi the boy Mechel, when he was coming to go ahead and eat the barley, I'll ratio parte hutza svase. He put his head in, and the thorns ripped apart his lips, which is a mum kavua. Amalei Dilma at Garamtale. Maybe he did it on purpose that he should get his lip split. I'm like, no, I didn't do it on purpose. So this is an example of a drisha that you'd have to do to the with the person to ascertain whether it was done in a manner that was clandestine, that was not permitted or not. So now, guys, there's a difference between taking the razor blade and cutting the lip of the animal versus putting the food on the other side and the animal go get cut by the razor blade. One is direct and one is indirect. But indirect is called grama. We say grama bin Yisakin is pata. So l'chayra, grama, how do you know grama would be us over here? In other words, Rabbi asked him, did you put the barley there on purpose that the animal should split its lip on the thorns? So Memela, you see, had you done it on purpose, it would be usar. Mehecha taisa that grama is usar le'inyan b'char. Where do you know that from? The Gemara is going to bring a proof. So Amalei said, Rabbi, to this individual, Dilma at garamtole, maybe you caused this. Amalei loy. When we're not taming the grama asa, how do you know grama is asa? The Tanya, it says by a b'char mum la boy. How do you know that you don't put the mum in, but even if you cause it, you bring some dough, or some dried fig. You got an animal, you got a nice little calf, a nice little ear. Go ahead, take a little dough, and put a little liver on it. Get your dog, and the dog is going to go ahead and chomp down on the treat, the special treat, and take off part of the ear. That's grama. So the kelvish come and take it. It says kol mum, amar mum, v'amar kol mum. It should have said mum. It says kol mum to go ahead and include what? Even al yadei grama. So it seems from the way the Gemara finished off, you should not look at a mum on Yontif, even though we didn't have anyone to go up against Rabbi Yehuda to support Rav Shimon, because in the conclusion of the end, we didn't have anything. So the bottom line is, Yamachlekas Rav Lazar B'Shimon, can you look at a Bechar on Yontif? Can you not look at a Bechar on Yontif? It's really amazing. These shilas were prevalent in those days, right? These shilohs are prevalent in those days. Simcha, I'm in the middle of share. I have to wish you a good yontif. Okay.
You got Moshe? Moshe, I make you shut up?
Say hello, Moshe.
Hi, we're in share.
Moshe's in share.
Okay, enjoy.
He's here. Sipar is here. I'm sorry.
Life is good.
Okay, enjoy everybody. Okay, good yontif.
Mrs. Stabra, it's like Reb Shimon, but there's nothing in Stabra.
Okay, anyway, so that's the Gemara. Okay, Behema, says the Mishnah, Behema she mesa loy yasizenim kaimer. You have an animal, it drops dead on Yontif, do not move it. It's muktzah. It's muktzah. Umaisa b'sholu es Rabbi Tarfon aleha. The yes Rabbi Tarfon, what's the din about an animal that dropped dead? And in addition, v'ala chala shenit mas, on chala that contracted tumah. Now, since it contracted tumah, the kohen can't eat it that day. The nichlas based on medrash v'shol. The amruloi, they asked the shayla to Rabbi Tarfon about the animal, about the chala. The amruloi, and they told him lo yazizim koimam. Right? They said to him that what you should not go ahead and move it. That it is what it is. It is, for all intents and purposes, it's muktzah. And as we're going to see, Rav Shimon would even agree with this muktzah. Again, we have machlokes in Masechta Shabbos throughout Shas, Rav Shimon and Rabbi Yehuda as to the far-reaching effects of muktzah. Rabbi Yehuda is machmir and Rabbi Shimon is mekel. Again, when it says Rabbi Shimon ainli muktzah, it doesn't mean chas v'shalom he doesn't hold the muktzah at all. It means that he doesn't hold up the far-reaching extent of muktzah. But there are cases where he does hold the muktzah, and such as the Gemara we're going to learn now in a minute, that you see there are certain scenarios where Rabbi Shimon holds of muktzah. Lema transtama deloik Rabbi Shimon. At first glance, when we're speaking about chala and behema, that they're both what? Muktzah, it must be the Rabbi Yehuda who holds the chumrah of muktzah. Rabbi Shimon Aimer, because Rabbi Shimon says, Michatkin es hadeluyin l'fnei behema. You can cut up a deluyin gourds in front of the animal. That's no big deal. Ves hanavelu l'fnei haklavim. Now, when the animal dies on Shabbos or Yontif, you're able to go ahead, cut it up, and let it klavim. So obviously, you must hold that the nevela is not muktzah. So therefore, our Mishnah says if the animal drops dead, you can't touch it. Must not be like Rav Shimon who says cut it up and feed it to the dogs. Rabbi Yehuda, I mean, hoisting the veil of Shabbos, if didn't die of Shabbos, asura. So right now, easy way, our Mishnah is according to Rabbi Yehuda and not according to Rav Shimon. Says the Gemara, afilu taim Rav Shimon. You could even say our Mishnah is according to Rav Shimon, and Rav Shimon will agree in this scenario that what in fact it is muktzah. The moida Rav Shimon bebali chayim. Rav Shimon is moida bebali chayim shemesu she'asurim. That bali chayim that died, they're asa. So the obvious question: so how do you get a piece of the veil cut up? If Rav Shimon holds, guys, look at me, guys. If Rav Shimon holds that you can go ahead and an animal dies, is also like our Mishnah. How do you have a heicha timtza of an animal dying? You cutting it up and feeding it to the dogs. So Rashi answers that. Shasurim, v'chi sharia. And when does Rabbi Shimon permit it? The misukenes ben hashmashos. The animal was a goisis. It was holding by going to the great corral in the sky. And therefore, since it was musukenes, the daite alave lachil klovim, you had in mind to feed to the dogs. So therefore, but a regular healthy animal, our Mishnah is speaking about a regular healthy animal. A regular healthy animal would be usher, even according to Rav Shimon, it's muktzah, because you have no way of thinking or possibly that it would die and leave this world. Okay? So right now, the Mishnah is according to everybody. It's according to Rav Shimon would be maida by a healthy animal that dies, it's muktzah, and therefore don't move it. Good. Right now, everything's okay. Not so fast. This is very good according to Mar Bar Meimar, Mishmei de Rava, who says in the name of Rava, the Amar Moida Hayir Shimon Bali Chaim Shemeshu says Surim Shapir. Very good. Elamar Berei de Rav Yosef, Mishmei de Rava, the Amar Cholik Hayir Rav Shimon Afilu Bali Chaim Shemeshu Shemutarim. That Rav Shimon holds even a healthy animal that dies is muta. Ma'ikla Meimar. How in the world can you say our Mishnah is according to Rav Shimon? Our Mishnah is speaking about L'chaira, speaking of a healthy animal that's dying, and Rav Shimon would still matter it. So therefore, the Mishnah would only be going according to Rabbi Yehuda. So Tir Gumur Ziri, you know what our Mishnah is speaking about? It's not speaking about stam, a healthy animal. It's speaking about a healthy behemoth kachim. It's speaking about an animal of kachim. An animal of kachim, guys, you can't feed to dogs. An animal kachim to be poida, according to some opinions, need hamad baracha only when it's alive. So very geschmack. Our Mishnah can be according to everyone because our Mishnah is not speaking about an animal of chulin. Our Mishnah is speaking about an animal of kachim. Since it's an animal of kachim and it dies, even Reb Shimon would say it's moed b'hana. When the Reb Shimon hold that what it's muta, it's not muksa by a healthy animal. That's an animal of chulin. But an animal of kachim that has that an aspect of kedusha, that case, that animal, Reb Shimon would be moed as muksa. So right now it's very geschmack. They can nami that our Mishnah is speaking about an animal of kachim. It's speaking about chala that became tamei. So now we're going to parallel the animal to chala. Chala the kedisha, afbehema the kedisha. Just like chala is kodesh belongs to the kayin, so to over here an animal that's kodesh. Good. So very good. So guys, we want to say in Mishnah according to Rabbi Yehuda, who holds a muktzah. So no, it could be even according to Rabbi Shimon. Rabbi Shimon is moeded by an animal of kachim, that will be muktzah. And our Mishnah is speaking about an animal of kachim. Elataima de kedisha. The reason why what this is muktzah because it's kodesh. Ha de chulin sharia. Now chulin would be muta, correct? So now 1 second. Ha nichla ma'berei Rav Yosef mishmei de Rav Adam achala kayir b'shemin afa bali chayim shemeshim b'tarim shapir. According to the opinion that matters, it makes sense. Our Mishnah is also because it's kachim. If with skulim, you can go ahead and move it. The first opinion in the Gemara that Rav Shimon is moida what? By chulin dika animals you can't move. My ikla meimar, guys, you got a problem. Our Mishnah now is not according to anybody, right? Why? Again, guys, you're saying the only reason it's usher in the Mishnah is because it's kachim, right? What happens if it's chulin? You could move it. Rabbi Yehuda doesn't hold that. Rabbi Yehuda says you can't. Rabbi Shimon doesn't hold that according to Mar Baramemish made the Rav. He also says you can't move it. So who's the Mishnah according to? And for the Gemara, the Mishnah is speaking about like kachim, and speaking about kachim, and therefore you can't move it. But Mesukenes by chulin, everyone would say Mesukenes Yadas is on it. Even Rabbi Yehuda would say you can move it, and even Rabbi Shimon would say you can move it. So Mamela, the diak's a good diak. Our Mishnah you can't move it because it's speaking about kachim. Had it been about chulin of a Mesukenes, then everyone would be moida that you could move it. Okay, I wish everyone a good yontif. I'm going to try to get in another